Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Sun in Scorpio and Capricorn rising. I've already done the reversed version of this combination and I titled it One Tough Goat or something along those lines because I do think that this is a tough combination, meaning that it is resilient. And when we use the word resilient, we're implying that somebody has had to be tested and they have, uh, survived regardless of what has been thrown at them. So I definitely think that that could go along with this combination as well. But this time we have Scorpio at the helm. That's what I would call the sun sign. I think that is the most important thing that we have to look at. But the rising sign can give influence when it comes to the person's appearance, mannerisms. We would call that maybe like their demeanor, the way that they behave around other people. So with Capricorn rising, this means that your ruler is Saturn. When a person's ruler is Saturn, they can come across as Saturnine. I think that's how you pronounce it, meaning that they're very serious, maybe even a little dour or pessimistic, because they are trying to be real. So, when people say, we have to just like deal with reality or something like that, that's kind of like the mentality of Capricorn. Maybe because of that Saturn influence, that it's all about what, the tangible factor, um, or the viability of something. So if somebody has a dream, a person with a prominent Capricorn is going to be very dismissive of it if they feel that that person is not grounded in reality and is just kind of coming up with these wild ideas. Whereas you might have somebody with a prominent Leo who's just going off on a tangent. I mean, going off and dreaming big with the other person, but you have to marry your dreams with your um, practical application, and you can't just have one without the other. So this is a very sobering type of an influence, and it gives the person an aura of common sense, being responsible. So, people may tend to trust you, think that you're not a flake, and professionalism. So, if you're applying for a job, people may think that you're competent, that you can do what they need you to do. And when you were young, you may have seemed older than your years. And they say that Capricorn gets younger as they get older. Now, they said that about the sign itself, so they might have been talking about the sun sign. But I think since this refers to appearance, the rising sign, it might be that you start to youth. And what they explained in one of the sources of information that I read about it is that when Capricorn is young, they're so busy trying to make it and trying to get to the top that once they achieve their goals, they can chill. And so they can just so it's almost like reversed, maybe adolescence or carefree 20s, when some people, that's when they go wild. And the Capricorn person, they're busy from the time that they're young, maybe. And I do think that somebody with Capricorn rising, you may have been ambitious since you were quite young too, because with the ascendant, we're talking about the influences from the time you were born. I think we grow into our sun signs, really. So you may have been born into an environment that was cold, austere. Maybe there was lack financially, but it could be the exact opposite where there was abundance in a material sense, but perhaps there was a lack when it came to emotions. So it can be either of those possibilities, and that can lead a person to feel as if they have to do things by themselves, like they can only depend on themselves. So, for instance, if somebody who has Capricorn rising is born into a family of addiction, they may have to do things, they may have to parent themselves. They may have to get their own breakfast and dress themselves from a very early age. Now, as tragic as that might sound, it's also a great way to become resourceful, where the person learns how to do things from childhood. And, I'm recording this from the United States, and there are places, maybe much of the world, where resources are a lot less plentiful. I mean, at least that the people own. The land probably is very plentiful, but that the people own. This is not necessarily uncommon. We're talking about in more developed countries where children are treated like this, but in other countries children work from an early age, or they do things for themselves from an early age. So that's the perspective I'm coming from. So I say that because even if you feel cheated, if you feel that you didn't get what you needed and you compare yourself to other people and how they lived, and maybe even when you were a child, you could see that other kids' parents were taking care of them at a different level, that might have been quite upsetting. But when you keep a larger perspective, you realize that there are some good things about this as well. That, you could talk about character building, but I don't really think it's about character. I think it's more about, because that seems more moral. I think it just, uh, in a practical way, it causes a person to learn how to find opportunities and to become very independent. One of the things about this combination, though, is that the person may be so independent that they become closed off and closed in. So, with the sun in Scorpio, you are a water sign and you could be considered emotional, but Scorpio people tend to be very secretive emotionally, and so they tend to keep their emotions tamped down within themselves. And this is something that they do in an attempt to feel powerful, because they feel that vulnerability is a weakness. And it is not. And this is one of the reasons why Scorpio people can suffer in relationships, because they do not necessarily give of themselves uh, at a deep level, but they can love very deeply. It's just that they may not give of themselves that way. And then the other person feels that there is something, that there's a disconnect in some way. So with Capricorn rising, this is not going to improve the situation, because Capricorn is like there's a hardness with Capricorn. And that hardness, I've heard it even described as stubbornness, which is kind of strange to me. Capricorn is represented by the mountain goat, or symbolized by the mountain goat. And I suppose you could say on one level that the goat is kind of hard headed, or he's got those horns that make him kind of butting up against people and maybe refusing to give in. But in general, I just think of it in terms of the person being very, um, the Saturn quality. I think it might even be like trust not trusting people very easily, wanting to do things themselves, believing, I think a lot of times it's believing that nobody is going to be there for them, so they have to just rely on themselves. Self-reliance is not a bad thing, it's a lot better than somebody who's a dependent personality, but it, even like on the emotional level, it can lead to a person who doesn't really express themselves very much. And I just feel that everyone in their own way has to learn how to do this so that they can really be well integrated. This combination is very good for career matters because you are going to be ambitious from both sides of the coin here. And that's wonderful. But there are plenty of examples of people who have a lot of success professionally, and then their personal life is in shambles. And yes, I'm talking about with one's significant other, but also with children. Maybe their children, they don't have the best relationships with their children, because they were maybe too severe. When I say severe, I mean their expectations were too high. They had conditional love, or they being too strict in some way, and not accepting enough of their children as they are, and things like that. And it's really sometimes a reflection on how they feel towards themselves. You might be very tough on yourself in a lot of ways with this combination. So learning to soften. I think that this can be kind of a harder, fiercer combination, and learning to be softer. But again, softness I would associate with vulnerability, and you might think that that's weak, that you have to be hard. And that would be a big mistake. So this is like the stiff upper lip, in terms of how you appear to other people. And yet I do feel that people who have a prominent Scorpio, like all the water signs, may have had trauma that affected them very deeply. What may have been your reaction is to try to achieve. Like, let's say you grew up in a dangerous neighborhood, like an inner city that was very full of violence and crime. You would be that kid who really was striving to get good grades so you could get out of that situation. Like, you actually believed that you could get out, even if you were surrounded by people who didn't have that vision for themselves. Even family members, you would have been that type of person to think that way. And when somebody approaches life that way, they're going to usually make it, because it really only takes that thought, that vision, that belief that there's something more out there. So that could be happening, or that could have happened for you. And by the way, I mean, this could be somebody who was brought up in a prominent family with Capricorn rising, but you might have sensed that there was something that was not quite right in some cases, because Scorpio can be about secrets. And this is why Scorpio is secretive, because, when I talk about trauma, it can be these taboos, these situations that are unacceptable in your life for some reason, that you have to kind of keep everything closed in. If this was like within the family, you might have been told, this stays within these walls and not to share it. But with Capricorn rising, that idea of maintaining the status quo and being respectable in the face of others. So if you were the child of somebody who was a a pastor or a politician or anything um, where there was some status attached to it, they may have wanted everything to look good on the surface, and another thing can be like that you had to make them look good. Like you had to be a high achiever. And it's not that Scorpio can't do that. That you can do that very easily. But I think that what makes Scorpio so interesting and yet maddening is that you have this rulership, this dual rulership of Pluto, but also Mars. And Mars is the ruler of Aries. And Aries is a very rebellious sign. So I really do feel that a lot of Scorpio people can be rebellious in their own way. And so with the Pluto influence, you have this penetrative insight into the nature, the true nature of people. And you know that what lies on the surface is just superficial, is artifice a lot of times. And you know that there might be something else going on because you had to live that way sometimes. And so you can see it in other people, and you may rebel against it because you may be like, no, I'm not going to think like that, especially if you have inner planets in Sag, because you're right next to Sag. So you could easily have, like, for instance, Mercury in Sag or Mars in Sagittarius, and you are like the truth teller, you are the moralist, and you may feel like the people, like if you were raised in a family and you felt like they were not um, honest, transparent, that may have really put you off, and it may be like your life's mission to just kind of expose the seedy underbelly of life, So whatever kind of profession that you end up getting involved with, let's say it was journalism or something, you would be the investigative reporter who kind of blows the lid off of the criminals trying to get one over on the public. So yeah, it's very interesting how that can all manifest sometimes. And regardless of what else is going on, I think this combination, the theme is really about, it might first be about survival, like in some cases, life and death, even. You have to look at other placements for this kind of thing to see how this is going to play out. Because if you have planets in the eighth house that indicate, like Pluto in the eighth or something that really suggests dramatic situations, or even first house, fourth house stuff going on, that can point to what you had to deal with in childhood. Look to the moon sign too for how you process your emotions. Um, for instance, if you're a Scorpio and your moon is in an air sign, or even I could say an earth sign, you may be a lot less emotional, and you really may try to be as rational as possible and try to cut out your emotions, which isn't a good thing, but it's a survival tactic, and it can serve you well if you have gone through a lot of emotional turmoil earlier on in life. So in terms of what kind of appearance, this could give, you might have high cheekbones with Capricorn rising. You may favor very classic trends. In fact, I mean, actually, it wouldn't be trends, classic designs in fashion rather than trends. And so it would be clean lines because Saturn is very minimalist. But I just admire that kind of look. I think that it really is very appealing. And when I say classic, I mean it never goes out of style. You can have pants that flare, and they're not like, you wouldn't say, oh, those are bell bombs from the 70s or in the 90s when they came back. You wouldn't say that because they have a certain line about them that makes them timeless. And, that goes for other types of clothing. And it may have almost like an elegance or a professional, but a professional elegance to it when the person has a lot of taste. So, with Libra influences, being that Libra is adjacent to Scorpio as well, if you have Venus in Libra, you may have very good taste in, aesthetic taste, and you're able to dress very wonderfully. And I mean, I really think there's a beauty with and a handsome quality with this sign, but it's very, like I said, minimalist. I think the women do not favor much makeup, but they can have beautiful bone structure in their face. And same with the men. David Bowie was a Capricorn. Of course, he was a sun sign, but I think some of these things can kind of be interchangeable. So you can have like great bone structure, male or female, that really carries the face, you could say. Can you tell I have Taurus rising, and so I'm ruled by Venus, and I'm thinking about these things, and I'm not thinking about these things in a superficial way. I'm just trying to describe them because I think it's very interesting. And then how you act may be kind of aloof or standoffish, similar to Aquarius, which is the sign after Capricorn, and also co-ruled by Saturn. But this is less friendly than Aquarius. Aquarius has that connection to the house of friendship, and you rule the house of career, so you're all about business, not pleasure. And this can give you a rather, like I said, a cold demeanor. It's not being mean. It's not that you're trying to be unfriendly, but you just are very serious, and that kind of shines through. I think that when you get to know somebody, the Scorpio can come out more, and that water energy, and people will see how caring you truly are. So I guess what I would say about this is be aware of how you may come across. And if you are looking, let's say you're looking for love, you're going to have to warm up to people. They're going to have to be more expressive and not in a phony way, but not, you can be yourself and still realize how you interact and be more like that Scorpio, which has a depth to it, emotional depth. So in terms of professions, I think anything, I actually think healthcare is something that may appeal to you because Scorpio can be the healer, the transformer, and Capricorn rules structures, and that can include the skeletal system. So I always say something like a physical therapist, but also maybe a physical trainer and a yoga teacher. Scorpio can be anything that's like a healer, and you may actually gravitate towards um, fields that involve um, spiritual, like shamanic practices. Some of you, the millennial generation, if you're born in the 80s into the 90s, um, you have Neptune in Capricorn, and you may actually be some of the big healers out there, but also making money from it. Capricorn, what is the bottom line is the career from it, the money from it, and the status, like being the best in your field. But Scorpio is really the healer ultimately. When Scorpio can get out of its own way in terms of the heavy emotions and can really just focus on healing the planet, I don't think there's anybody better. I don't think there's a more potent magician than a Scorpio. But it just is that Scorpio carries with it very strong emotions, and that can sometimes be turned against, you can turn them against yourself. So really striving for the highest level. This combination, I always say the lower nature of Scorpio can be very full of vengeance. And I think Capricorn can be very cynical and bitter. And so you have to be able to be a bigger person and not need, to have other people face their karmic just desserts. Because I think both of these signs, Saturn is the lord of karma, and Pluto is, in a tarot, the judgment card is connected to Pluto. It's like that cause and effect. And I think it's because Scorpio is like that sign that is all about the retribution when it's not in its highest vibration. If you ask me and say, well, how am I supposed to feel about a situation if I have been done wrong by someone and it was very serious, the wrong? And the way that you do that is that like when you're looking at Google Maps or some maps and they have the plus and minus and you're trying to see a larger area and you put the minus, don't put the plus, it'll get more magnified. But you take it out. So you put the minus and you take it out. So zoom out um, mentally, and you look at the bigger picture of the situation of somebody who did that to you. And the first thing that you say is that hurt people hurt people. That's not excusing people for their bad behavior. That is understanding that that person is suffering. Even if they are on social media and they act like they're happy and all that stuff, I don't believe that anyone can be happy when they're going around hurting people. And some of these people are, or maybe you could say all of them, that are like um, malignant narcissists, people who are energy vampires. They are very damaged people. And so part of that is they have a very fragile ego. And so they may love social media and trying to present an image of themselves that is like, they're having such a great time in life, but that might not be what's really happening. So you can get fooled by that and you can be like, they should be suffering. And if you pray for their understanding, that is like the highest thing, because really that's what they need. Even someone going to jail, that might not give them the understanding of what they've done. And that's the problem with these kinds of forms of punishment, is that they don't necessarily solve the problem. And that's what we're looking for. So in terms of relationships, you have to learn to trust. And the number one way that you do that is by not worrying about somebody somehow turning against you, betraying you, all of that stuff, which really uh, comes from a position of, it's almost like a power struggle in a sense. Like they're not going to ever be able to control me the way that I felt helpless when I was growing up. They're never going to be able to do that. And so you try to gain the upper hand in your relationships in some way, and that can lead to um, relationships that are not really authentic. Sometimes money can even be involved in a certain way. I don't think of Scorpio as like a really free spending sign, but Scorpio rules the house of other people's money. So sometimes, and Capricorn is an earth sign, and I think that sometimes people use money to control others. And earth signs believe that you have, especially like if you have Venus in an earth sign, and you might be, yeah, it might be possible for some Scorpios to have Venus in Capricorn, for instance, or Venus in Virgo, but I don't think Virgo does this as much as Capricorn with regarding status. Uh, and usually, if somebody has Venus in Capricorn, they're going to be the one who is looking for somebody to partner with who has the goods, because there's like that desire for a partner, or maybe it's not necessarily just like a gold digger. I mean, it could be something like that, but it could also be something where you're just looking for someone that you can build a life with, but that is a very important quality to you, how much money that they make. And I'm not saying that that is completely beyond the pale, but it might be a little bit too much of what you focus on instead of, do we have love or at least great respect for one another? Um, there might be a very small percentage of you where you are involved with someone, and maybe if you, and I'm saying especially if you have Venus in Capricorn, where they um, either they are much older than you or you are older than them, and it's like it's a relationship. If you're older than them, you're almost like their mentor in a certain way. I'm not talking about like a creepy situation, but just simply where you can feel more in control of that relationship. And money plays a part in it because you may be more established than they are. But you have to, you have to really see, is this a true relationship, or is it more of a thing where you can feel more comfortable and in control of it? And if it's the other way around, if you did not have parenting growing up, you may favor some kind of relationship where you are, um, you know, um, being taken care of. And again, I'm not saying it's creepy. It's just that you missed out on that and you want that kind of a treatment from another person. So there has to be some true understanding of what you are getting yourself into to make sure that relationships are that it's the real deal. But I do think this is a family oriented combination, so you may favor that, either having your own children or um, they call them, I guess, bonus children, like if you're a step parent, and you might enjoy that kind of lifestyle. Um, yeah, so that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.